Hello, everyone. I'm Walker Bragman, and I'm here with former enlisted Marine Sergeant Shamar Thomas. Uh, for those of you who don't know, Sergeant Thomas he made national headlines during Occupy. He confronted the NYPD over police brutality.
I put in my work. It doesn't lie. It does not make you tough to hurt these people. There's nothing tough about it. Nothing. If you want to go fight, go to Iraq and Afghanistan. But you want to be here hurting U.S. citizens. Where is that in the contract? Where is that in the contract? Leave these people alone. They're U.S. citizens. U.S. citizens. U.S. citizens. U.S. It does not make you tough to do this to them.
And it is a real privilege to have him here and speak with him today. So, Sergeant Thomas, thank you so much for taking the time.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It's good to be here.
So everything on your end is good. I know we before this we talked a little bit, but everything good with you?
I'm doing well. My family's doing well. I actually came back from a trip from 11 African countries in February, and I came right back to COVID. But it's, outside of what's going on in the media, it's been great to connect with family and be back and really absorb this time with them. So I can't complain,
Well, I'm glad to hear that. So how has it been for you watching the footage of the protests and the police violence? I mean, on camera, police murdering unarmed Black Americans. I mean, these are our countrymen.
It's been very troubling. I got out the Marine Corps active duty in 2007. And I attended college about 3 weeks after I got out of the Marine Corps. And in one of my classes, I had to do a paper about police brutality, coincidentally. And I did a case with this guy called Jesse Lee Williams. And he was killed by corrections officers in, I believe, Mississippi. And ever since 2007, I have been enthralled in police brutality and police corruption and things of that nature. And so since that time, I have, even with my protesting, I've been able to meet the families. I've been able to really get a sense of police brutality. So to see that it continues after, 13 years, it's just very disheartening. And I'm at a point of really trying to understand how to be most effective in a solution to really quell it. I really, I think there's a big, disconnection in how people are trained. The police are trained as far as, when they get their training, they're taught that they are not liked because they wear a uniform and not because of the actions that they commit against the citizens that they're there to protect. So it's just like this big disconnect where they have this sense that we don't like them and that we are almost the enemy. And you can see that in so many ways, So it's just very difficult for me to really take it all in and not be frustrated. So I'm just trying to stay even keeled and really come up with some solutions.
So you served 2 tours in Iraq. Do you see any parallels between your experiences abroad and what you've come back to witness at home over the last decade?
Yeah, I mean, it's something that I talk about also is going to war and being a Marine. We're taught this, this honor code and this system of actually being warriors, and that warriors don't take any pride in hurting unarmed civilians. Like, there's no pride in that as a warrior. You want to fight other warriors. And so to see police officers that go home to their families most nights and are not dealing with bombs and dealing with a society that they're invading, like we were invading people's, neighborhoods and countries and homes and things of that nature. So for us to have 18-year-olds and 19-year-olds to be put, I was 18 years old when I first went to war. I had my 19th birthday in Iraq, and then I went back when I was 20. To be put in those positions at such a young age, and to have the presence of mind to know that I am not here. We went there to win the hearts and minds, and it's like, why aren't the police officers necessarily trying to win the hearts and minds of the people? So it's very disheartening to really see what is happening in this country, and that a lot of veterans are not necessarily stepping up. They take more pride in saying that they served in these faraway lands. I'm an Iraq veteran, I'm an Afghanistan veteran, I'm a Bosnian veteran, and all these kind of things, but they do nothing at home. And so it's like, this is where we really need to step up and protect our own people,
So do you think that the problem is, do you think that this is a problem that we can reform away? What do you make of the calls to defund the police versus reform the police? You made an interesting comparison just now between warriors abroad trying to win the hearts and minds of people whose homes they were invading, and police who are ostensibly members of the same community as the people that they are supposed to be protecting and serving. So do you think, so I guess to go back to the question, what do you make of calls to defund the police versus reform?
I'm not necessarily, I don't necessarily understand to the extent of defunding police what that entails at the end of the day. Like, what does that mean at the end of the day, saying that we're going to cut your budgets? Is that going to make the police more efficient? Is that going to make the police less apt to killing people of color? I'm not exactly sure, but I do know for sure that we do need reform. I think that one of the biggest things, because like I said, because I've been in this fight for so many years, I've realized that one of the biggest hurdles that we have is that the police investigate the police, and the district attorneys work so closely with the police that when cases like this come up, they're very conflicted in how they deal with the situation, because they don't want to, they're a part of that blue team, they're part of that blue stripe that goes around these, district attorneys, because they're working with these police officers every day. And so I think one of the biggest things is how we prosecute the police officers, and how they're trained and how they respond to certain situations. And that's one of the biggest things. So if that's considered reform, then I'm more of a reform person instead of a defunding police, because like I said, I don't necessarily understand how, and maybe somebody can educate me later, but I'm not exactly sure how that is going to affect how police treat the citizens.
So I think the ideas that have been put out there, a lot of them center on taking money from the police forces and investing them in community response programs, crisis counselors, unarmed professionals who would respond to post calls. So things like that.
Okay.
So I did want to ask, because you were at the 2011 Occupy protests when everything went down. What are some of the things that you saw back then, and what are some of the things that you saw back then that have continued today, that you continue to see today?
As far as what?
In terms of police response to peaceful protests.
I mean, in this protest, in 2011, I think, in 2011, I think that police response to protests were a lot more violent. They're still violent. Like, I've still seen, police handle protesters in a violent way. But I think a lot more police officers are and I don't know if this is just a media thing because I've been quarantined. I've went to a George Floyd protest. I went to his memorial in North Carolina, but I've seen police actually kneel with the people and try to make some kind of community response in how they deal with it. But then I've also seen the NYPD up to their same old tactics of pushing and brutalizing people and handling people aggressively. So,
yeah, a lot of the same cops, a lot of some who kneel end up a few hours later with their batons out.
Yeah. So it's really, like I said, I've seen more people activated, but there's still those same good old boys that are out there that are like, man, forget these people. And they're really, they really have this sense of entitlement and that they're above the law. And I mean, at the end of the day, they know that their brothers are going to take care of them. When their wives and kids get pulled over by police, all they have to do is pull out a shield or a badge or a card and they're all scot-free. So their whole lives and how they deal with, civilians, they really take people's freedom on a daily basis. And I think it really goes to their head, and they're taught that they're the ones who need to take control. So, like I said, on one end, I am happy that I have seen some police departments really try to do that community thing. But like I said, I've seen I've still seen some of the same good old boys out there, continuously brutalizing the police. And that's why I really call on these veterans who fought in these wars to really step up. And in North Carolina, I've talked to some veterans, and I've talked to veterans that I've served with that are more activated, who've gone to protest to protect protesters. So I think that, the veteran community is a very big buffer in what goes on, because we actually our voices are more heard by those in law enforcement because of that same, a lot of the police officers have served and they understand the wars that we actually fought. So, veterans have to step up and really do some more, domestic, domestic winning of hearts and minds,
So you're also a black man in America at a time, not that I don't think there's ever really been a time when being a black man in America has afforded the same privileges that being a white man in America has. But you fought to serve. You fought to serve this country. You went and served this country. Do you feel? Do you feel that your service has been appreciated? I guess in the way that in the sense that you came back to a country that is still very racially divided, and still murdering people who look like you because they look like you.
Yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, I feel like since every war that black men have fought in this country has just given, I feel like my service has given me a leg up to speak up, where to a certain degree, they have to respect my right to protect my community and protect people who look like me. But I think that all of the young men and women who've died of any race and any color, who have died under the guise of freedom, their graves have been spit on by police brutality, because these young men and women have died for people's free, and people can say, oh, whether the war in Iraq was really about freedom or anything like that, or whether we're really truly fighting over freedom, but we are fighting under the guise of freedom. And to see how police treat the people that we fought to protect is a spitting on the graves of everybody who served this country. And as a black man, to have served this country in the capacity that I did, where it was, I loved the person to the right and left of me, and You know, I fought in the Battle of Fallujah where I didn't, you know, I shot at people and people shot at me on a regular basis. And I didn't take a shower for 3 weeks and really slept in the dirt and really see my brothers in body bags to really go through those ordeals and come home to a place where Black men are not valued, or that even, you know, I've been in, when I came home, I went to Brooklyn. I've been in Brooklyn where police have treated me a certain way without committing a crime. And as soon as I said I was a United States Marine, their whole body language and how they treated me changed. And it was like, if I wasn't a Marine, they would have literally put me in jail and done all these different, you know, negative things to me because I was just the color of my skin and because I was big. I was a big Black man in Brooklyn. And so until I said, hey, I'm a United States Marine, you know, it was like, no, you're just a regular Black man to us. You know, I won't say any other words, but you're just a normal Black man that's up to no good or doing whatever. So I have seen it. You know, I've been arrested in New York. The police said that they saw my friend smoking weed and told me that if I didn't tell them where the weed was, that they would arrest me. And I told them I didn't know where the weed was, and they literally arrested me. So it has been something that is going on in our communities that is really hard to take and is really hard to deal with. And that's why I'm coming at a place of education now at this point, and really understanding how we can really positively making a change. And so I'm open, you know, to all ideas right now.
What do you think? What are some immediate steps you think could be taken to de-escalate the tension that this tense place that we're in as a country?
I mean, I think about this on a daily basis, but I'm not exactly sure of the immediate steps. I know that how we prosecute police officers needs to change, as far as them how they deal with police. I mean, if the police officers shoot an unarmed person, I think that they should go through the normal judicial processes of any person. I mean, if they're not involved in a gun battle, the fact that they took a human life without that person being armed, I think that they need to go through judicial processes and be arrested. And that is something that, you know, I do have some kind of wherewithal where I can understand people being put in certain situations where mistakes can happen or that they can be under certain levels of stress. But at the end of the day, if somebody doesn't have a weapon, that totally changes the ballgame for me. So I think that there is no short way we can really quell it, other than the prosecution and arrest of police officers who commit these acts, and really focus on police reform, and really focusing on how we train police officers and how we do these things. And like I said, the only reason I don't want to give these long drawn out answers is because everybody seems to have their own theories, and I don't want to put something out in the atmosphere that I'm not totally confident in. So
you're listening.
Listening. Exactly.
And I think that's a good place for everybody to sort of to be, because you know, people are speaking up, people are proposing solutions, people are finally being heard that have not been heard. I mean, those are obviously positives, despite all of the horrific violence that we have seen, the murders on camera.
And that's what I think the difference is now. It was like police brutality has always been there, but for people to have to sit through a 9-minute video and physically watch it, it naturally wrenches the heart. Like, to actually have to physically sit there and watch it for that length of period of time. There was actually another man, because like I said, I've been involved in this, named Luis Rodriguez, who the same thing happened to him in Texas. You know, him and his daughter got into a verbal dispute, and the police did the same exact thing to him. But I think in this day and age, for people to see the life being sucked out of his body in real time, it really set things ablaze, you know. But this thing has been happening, and I'm happy that people are activated, you know, from Occupy Wall Street days, when I was out there protesting, even, you know, in the years after that, you know, with the Kamani Grays and Ramarley Grahams and different people like that, the Kenny Lazos out in Long Island. You know, it was kind of difficult to get my friends to come out and protest. I always have like one or two friends that would, and now all those same people who wouldn't necessarily protest for me are now all in the streets. So to see people so activated is amazing, and quite honestly almost unbelievable. So I'm so proud of people for actually caring enough, but you know, we have to continue to do this for everybody, and we have to really come up with a process to really deal with that, whether it be, you know, taking lessons from Occupy in the sense of like going in these courtrooms 1,000 deep, you know, every time that something happens to people, we need people to give up those 2 hours out of their day or their week to really pack courtrooms, to really get out there and do things, and not just be activated when their heart, you know, when their heart desires. Every time these things happen, we have to have a response to it.
So some of the lessons, so obviously some of the lessons protesters today could take from Occupy, but do you think that the Occupy movement was very effective at changing the national conversation, as I think these protests have been even more effective at changing the national conversation? But at some point, you know, there has to be a real systemic change, and we're still waiting on that from the Occupy days.
For real.
We haven't seen that from Occupy. You know, the wealthy who were in power then are still powerful. They're still wealthy today. They're still calling the shots. The recovery that we had, the economic recovery, most of America is still waiting on that.
Yeah.
Or at least a significant chunk. I think even before Trump got elected, 40% of Americans were struggling to afford at least one basic necessity. So how can this movement, what can this movement do to be more effective at forcing solutions than Occupy? Because we've already seen from Democrats sort of the same kind of milquetoast response that was given after Occupy. We're going to make these little reforms here and there, and then we're going to drop the issue altogether, which is, I think, the next step. So what can people do to keep the pressure on?
Yeah, and let me go back. I don't want to make it seem like that Occupy was the greatest thing in the world, but I do, like you said, it did change the conversation, and I think now that this has happened, we've changed the conversation, and I think that the next thing that has happened will cause more action. And so what people don't understand, and it's just like, you look in the news now, more acts of police brutality continue to happen. Unarmed people continue to be killed by police. Police in this last week, you know,
Rayshard Brooks
cases, you know,
that was a hard video.
Yeah. And so it's not necessarily about the actual Occupy or the Black Lives Matter or any of these, you know, banners. It's about people's awareness of it, and that at some point we are going to have leadership that comes together to make a concise list or almost a constitution-like thing that we need to amend to how we live our lives in America. And so I think that people will be more more receptive to these changes after these movements, you know what I mean? Because they're being activated, because the conversation is changing, because they're starting to care about it more. So I just think that, you know, we're gonna have to come together, and so it's gonna take people like myself in the veterans community, people from the Indian community, Black community, white community, all communities to really come together and really sit down and decide how we're going to deal with these things. But as far as just going in the streets, protesting, that, like I said, that's always good for awareness and getting people activated and making sure that people understand that people really do care. But we're going to have to, you know, we're going to have to change. And I don't necessarily want to say it on this because, you know, I'm already a little blacklisted. So I'm a little blacklisted. So I try to keep my ideas a little, you know, in the wraps. But I do know that there are people working behind the scenes to really come up with certain changes that at the next point, because like I said, from Occupy to Black Lives Matter, there's going to be a next point. There's going to be another global action. And when that action comes, hopefully we can have something put in place, you know?
Do you think that people from this movement should start running for office? I mean, I know that you know people say all the time, you know, vote, and voting hasn't really delivered the changes that people need to see in the last, I mean, for quite some time now. But there is a new class of progressive candidates out there. I've had the privilege of speaking with a number of them.
Yeah.
Do you think that this movement will be a hot spring of newly activated political candidates, and is that a desirable thing to happen?
I mean, at the end of the day, I totally believe in, and it goes for even with the police department and politics. I think that we need people who care in positions of power and positions of authority. So, but just like myself, I think that people who get in these positions have to understand what they're dealing with and what the end goal is. And I think that a lot of people are coming at it from a place of passion, you know, where, you know, just because you're well-intentioned doesn't mean that you're going to do the right thing and make things happen in a positive way. So naturally, I would never tell people who genuinely care about the system to not do it, but what are you going to do in these places? And so they have politicians that that I truly think would necessarily do a good job, but those are not the people who those are not the people that necessarily get elected. So how can we really, you know, it's like
Preaching to the choir here.
those are not, you know, they during Occupy, and even now, you like I don't endorse any political candidate. I don't think that anyone is necessarily better than the other one, but they had the guy Bernie Sanders, who really, you know, sounds like a good guy. But even hearing his thoughts and ideas and good intention, I was like, they will never vote this into office. You know, like this is never gonna fit the status quo, or he's never gonna make those allegiances enough to get in that door. So is it really like, is this really the right way to go? You know what I mean? So, and it's like you can't be a anti-supporter instead of a pro-supporter. So I just choose to support people at a local level who can make change in the community in a quick way, because it's like when you deal with these towns and in certain levels of government, like you can make a positive impact in your community. Like one of my end goals is I'm from Roosevelt, New York, and I want to be the mayor of Hempstead, you know, when I'm like 45. I want to be, well, I would take it now, but I want to be the mayor.
Would you consider running for office?
Yeah, I mean, I consider it. I want to really make an impact though, and so I definitely consider running for office, but I want to, you know, you can't be the president of the United States until you're 35, and I'm 34. So I just feel like you said, I'm at a point of listening, and I'm really at that point of really listening, and I'm researching how to really make systemic change. And, you know, like I said, I really want to be the mayor of where I come from because
I think I've heard that story before. Small town mayor goes on to run for the House, goes on to run for the Senate, and the next thing you know, he's got a movement behind him, and it's
and that's where I'm at. You know, I want to, because I feel like so many politicians are great at politics, but how many of them have really made an impact on where they come from, where they can say that they've changed the school district, how people eat, the poverty levels, the different things. Like, they're great orators and they motivate people, and we need that. But like, I feel like I wouldn't ever go for anything higher than being the mayor until I actually change my community. And so I think a lot of people, I went to the Congressional Black Caucus one time, and they looked at me like I was a zombie when I said, you know, all of you have done so many, you know, great things in your community. Like, why don't y'all come up with one blueprint to save one community? To save one community. Save Flint, Michigan. It's 50 of y'all in this room. Y'all can't come up with one way to save Flint, Michigan. You know, like, why can't we all come up with one way to save one community at a time? You know, and so that's, you know, my lofty goals, you know, at this point.
Well, Sergeant Thomas, thank you so much for taking the time and speaking with me. I don't want to take up the rest of your afternoon, but I would like to say before I end this that I first became aware of you during the Occupy movement when your video when the video of you went viral, and it was such a powerful moment caught on camera that somebody was actually standing up to these protesters, and somebody who had served and speaking with such authority and gravitas. And I have to say, it is very strange to hear that you are only 3 years older than me, because I did not know that at the time. Younger Walker lionized you, and so it is a real privilege for me to have you here and to be able to speak with you and pick your brain. And I do hope that we can do this again, and maybe under happier circumstances.
Yeah, no question. And I thank you for taking out the time and really caring enough, because I feel like people who understand my message, and I've always been a proponent of, like, people really, if my message really resonates with you, like, you're a very caring person and you understand honor and integrity. And so for you to do this and take your time out to even do this interview, it speaks highly of who you are. And I really appreciate you reaching out to me, man. And I hope, you know, I wish you the best. And if you ever need me again in the future, I'm always here for you, man.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you. Have a great day.
You too.
To everybody. God bless.